There are places on earth where time seems suspended, where absence speaks louder than presence, where the invisible weighs more than what can be seen. The body of Moses is one such place, a mystery buried not only beneath the soil of Moab, but within the folds of God's eternal purpose. Why would Satan have taken an interest in something so seemingly inert? Because in that body rested more than flesh and bones. It held a story intertwined with divine faithfulness, a living promise, a testimony that hell sought to silence. In this video, we will dive into one of the most enigmatic chapters of Scripture, the celestial dispute over the body of Moses, a silent battle between light and darkness that still echoes today. From the earliest accounts of Exodus, Moses' life was always marked by a narrative of miracles and conflicts. Saved from the waters of the Nile through providential intervention, educated in Pharaoh's courts, and ultimately called to be the liberator of an enslaved people, Moses carries in his journey the marks of redemption and judgment. He spoke with God face to face, received the tablets of the law, led Israel through the wilderness, and interceded in tears for a rebellious people. But at the end of his journey, a disconcerting detail. He dies far from the promised land, buried by divine hands, and his tomb remains hidden. No procession, no gravestone, no memorial. The absence of Moses' body becomes a silent cry, a reminder that not everything grand in God's eyes will be exposed to human eyes. The book of Deuteronomy, chapter 34, recounts in an almost abrupt manner that the Lord buried him in a valley in the land of Moab, opposite Beth Peor, and that no one knows to this day where his grave lies. This omission is not accidental. God does not act by chance. The absence of an accessible tomb is a shield against idolatry, against excessive veneration, against the human gaze shifting from divine glory to the glory of a servant. But there is even more behind this silence. The Epistle of Jude in the New Testament reveals that behind the veil of the invisible, something else was unfolding. The archangel Michael, warring against Satan, was contending for the body of Moses. What is there in the body of a man of God that provokes such spiritual upheaval? That is the question that will guide us today. If this topic stirs your faith and spiritual curiosity, I invite you to subscribe to the channel now. Here, we explore mysteries hidden in Scripture, profound spiritual revelations, and signs of God's invisible work. Don't miss any updates. Subscribe, turn on notifications, and join us in uncovering the hidden treasures of the Word. The dispute over Moses' body is not an isolated episode. It connects to an invisible thread that runs through the entire biblical story. The relentless struggle between the kingdom of light and the empire of darkness. When Satan attempts to claim Moses' body, he is not interested in dead matter. What he seeks is the spiritual significance that body carries. Moses was not merely a liberator. He was a symbol of the covenant, the law, and intercession. His body, in other words, was a living piece on the great prophetic chessboard that God had been assembling since the days of Abraham. Idolatry was a real risk. The people of Israel, who had witnessed indescribable miracles, demonstrated a troubling tendency to turn sacred objects into idols. Not long after their deliverance from Egypt, they fashioned a golden calf and worshipped it as if it were the God who had freed them from slavery. If a bronze staff, the serpent made by Moses to heal the poisoned, was later idolized until it was destroyed by Hezekiah, what would they not do with the body of the greatest prophet Israel had ever known? God, knowing the frailty of the human heart, hid Moses' body to protect the people from themselves. However, there was also a deeper, spiritual, and eschatological dimension to this dispute. Moses' body would be a temptation not only for idolatry, but for spiritual manipulation. Satan knew he could use that body as a tool of deception, diverting the focus from pure faith in the invisible God to the worship of tangible relics. This strategy was not new. Since Eden, the serpent had seduced humanity into trading direct communion with God for something more palpable, more visible, more immediate. Moses' body could become a new Eden of perdition if it fell into the wrong hands. Michael, the archangel, emerges in this scenario as the defender of God's sovereignty. The dispute is not resolved by theological argumentation or displays of strength, but by the superior authority of the Lord himself. "The Lord rebuke you," Michael declares to Satan. There is no debate, no negotiation, because in sacred matters the final word belongs neither to men nor to angels, but to God. And God decided that this body would be preserved, sealed, protected. This scene also teaches us something profound about spiritual warfare. Many battles are not won through persistence or cunning, but through the firmness of spiritual position. Michael does not allow himself to be drawn into an endless argument with the accuser. He simply anchors himself in divine authority. This stance is a model for us. In the face of spiritual accusations, our defense lies not in our own righteousness, but in the Lord who called us. The uniqueness of Moses' body also points to something even greater. Centuries later, on an unknown mountain in Galilee, the transfiguration of Jesus takes place. There, before the astonished eyes of Peter, James, and John, two figures appear: Elijah and Moses. Elijah, the prophet taken to heaven in a whirlwind of fire, and Moses, whose body no one found. Both converse with Christ in a moment that seals the connection between the law, the prophets, and the gospel of grace. Moses, who did not enter the promised land with his earthly feet, now stands on the mountain of celestial glory alongside the Messiah, not as a condemned man, but as a living witness to the fulfilled promise. The body that Satan sought to claim for death, God glorified for life. And this scene is not merely a consolation, it is a declaration of war against hell. It shows that death does not have the final word, that God's faithfulness transcends the grave, that what he guards, no principality or power can touch. Satan wanted to use Moses' body to sow doubt, idolatry, and despair. God used it to proclaim redemption, continuity, and future glory. And just as Moses was preserved for a greater purpose, so too are those who walk with God, even in silence, even hidden from the world's eyes, kept for future revelations that heaven has already decreed. The dispute over Moses' body is, therefore, a window into understanding the seriousness of the spiritual warfare waged over God's instruments. When heaven seals something as sacred, hell mobilizes to corrupt or capture it. But the Lord's authority is unbreakable. Every hidden detail, every preserved body, every testimony silenced to human eyes carries a promise of future revelation. Nothing that belongs to God will be lost, even if it is temporarily concealed. Moses, in his life, was far more than the lawgiver of Sinai. He was the intercessor who stood between divine wrath and a rebellious people. He was the one who dared to ask, "Lord, show me your glory," and who beheld, even if from behind, the manifestation of divine presence. His death, therefore, could not be a trivial event. His body could not be left to curious eyes or profane hands. It had to be hidden, because it would yet bear witness to something beyond human understanding, the final victory of grace over accusation. In Jewish tradition and the consciousness of the people of Israel, Moses was considered the ultimate expression of spiritual leadership. His authority was unquestionable. If his body had been found, a shrine would undoubtedly have been built in his honor, diverting worship from God to man. And the devil knows how to exploit such deviations with mastery. A pilgrimage site supposedly dedicated to Moses' memory would quickly become a center of spiritual idolatry, contaminating pure faith with empty external practices. This tendency repeats throughout history. Humanity has always struggled to worship the invisible, We prefer what we can touch, see, feel. From the golden calf to medieval relics to the present day, there is a constant impulse to turn instruments of faith into idols. That is why God hid Moses' body, not out of disdain, but out of zeal, not out of neglect, but out of love. Moses' appearance at the Transfiguration also sheds new light on this issue. There, he appears alongside Elijah, both alive, conscious, and glorified. Not as statues venerated by men, but as active participants in the divine plan. Moses, the representative of the law, and Elijah, the representative of the prophets, bear witness that Jesus is the fulfillment of all that Scripture announced. And in this encounter, it becomes clear that Moses' story did not end in Moab. It found its climax in the glory of the Mount of Transfiguration. But the dispute over the body reveals even deeper layers. It was not just about idolatry, but also about the enemy's attempt to tarnish the narrative of redemption. Satan is called in the Bible the accuser of the brethren. His strategy is always the same: to bring up the past of the saints, their failures, their mistakes, their falls, and use them as arguments to disqualify them before God. Moses was not a man without flaws. He killed an Egyptian. He doubted. He struck the rock when God had commanded him only to speak. His mistake cost him entry into the promised land. To the accuser's eyes, all of this was ammunition. If he could claim Moses' body, he could cast a shadow over all the work God had done through him. He could insinuate that the law failed, that the leader stumbled, that the promise remained incomplete. But Michael did not play that game. He did not argue or refute the accusations. He simply said, "The Lord rebuke you," because redemption is not based on human impeccability, but on divine faithfulness. Moses was flawed, yes, but he was chosen, he was sealed, he was guarded, and that was enough. This lesson is crucial for us. How many times does the enemy try to paralyze us by reminding us of our mistakes? How many times do we try to justify ourselves, defend ourselves, prove our worth? Michael's response teaches us that our defense lies not in our performance, but in our position before God. We are justified not because we are perfect, but because we have been called, washed, and sealed by the blood of the Lamb. Moses' body, guarded by God himself, becomes a symbol of hope for all who walk with him. What was hidden was not forgotten. What was concealed was not despised. On the contrary, it was reserved for a greater purpose. When Jesus is transfigured, he anticipates in himself the glory that will one day be revealed in all of God's children. Moses, at his side, is living proof that the story of the righteous does not end in death, that what God began, he will complete. And if we move forward to the prophecy of Revelation 11, we find another fascinating clue. It speaks of two witnesses who will prophesy in the last days. They will have authority to shut the heavens, turn water into blood, and strike the earth with all kinds of plagues. The signs accompanying these witnesses clearly echo the ministries of Moses and Elijah. Many ancient scholars, and even today, see in these two figures the possibility of Moses and Elijah returning as witnesses of the imminent judgment. If this is true, then Moses' body, hidden for millennia, is not merely preserved as a relic, but reserved as an instrument of judgment, a body sealed for a prophetic time, for a mission yet to be fulfilled. Be that as it may, the lesson remains. What God sets apart, hell cannot steal. What God seals, the accuser cannot revoke. What God promises, he fulfills, even if centuries pass. The silence surrounding Moses' body is, in fact, a song of hope, because it reminds us that neither death, nor oblivion, nor corruption can hinder God's work. Everything consecrated to him will in due time be manifested in glory. Just as Moses appeared alongside Jesus in splendor, so too will we, if we remain faithful, one day be transformed and revealed with Christ in glory. Our mortal body will be clothed with incorruptibility. Our story, full of flaws and falls, will be enveloped in the light of redemption. Moses' body is a sign for us that what belongs to God is guarded, protected, and exalted in due time, that the final word belongs not to the accuser, but to the Redeemer, that even what today seems like silence and concealment is in fact being prepared for a glorious conclusion. While Satan tried to write the end of Moses' story, God had already planned a new beginning. A beginning that would surpass the wilderness, death, and oblivion. A beginning that would be revealed not among stones and sand, but in the radiance of eternity. Moses did not disappear. He was preserved. And on the Mount of Transfiguration, he reappeared. Not as a symbol of defeat, but as a witness to the final victory of grace over the law, of life over death, of light over darkness. Today, the mystery of Moses' body continues to echo as a living message for all of us. What is set apart by God will never be lost. Every tear, every prayer, every faithful step, even if it seems forgotten, is being preserved for the day of revelation. Do not fear the wilderness or the silence. Where man sees an end, God sees a promise. And what the enemy tried to erase, the Lord will exalt in glory. Trust, your testimony is being written in the eternal book. The glory to come is greater than all accusation, because the final word belongs to the living God.